The sun rose over the dusty Nevada training ground as the air began to hum with the sound of discipline. Rows of Navy SEALs stood shoulder to shoulder, their boots pressed into the dry earth, rifles checked, ammo clips loaded, helmets tucked under one arm. The colonel barked orders sharp enough to echo off the range barriers, his shadow stretching long across the tarmac. He'd done this 1,000 times, run 1,000 drills. But today, by the fence near the base gate, something out of place made a few heads turn. A little girl, maybe 12, watching. She wore an old denim jacket that hung a bit loose around her arms, hair pulled back in a tidy ponytail, boots that didn't match the military standard but looked tough enough to handle the dirt. Beside her, an older man in a weathered marine ball cap rested one hand on her shoulder, eyes scanning the drills. He wasn't in uniform anymore, but his posture gave him away. Retired, maybe. But no one missed the way the colonel's eyes narrowed as he noticed the pair, curiosity mixing with mild irritation at the break in routine. When the line of SEALs began their warm-up shots, the girl didn't flinch at the loud cracks that cut through the early morning quiet. Instead, she leaned forward, eyes bright as they tracked the paper targets fluttering downrange. The colonel finished barking instructions and strode over, boots crunching on gravel. He glanced at the girl, then at the old Marine, and raised an eyebrow. The father's voice was calm as he asked permission for his daughter to take a single shot. The colonel's bark of laughter made a few of the SEALs smirk behind him. "This isn't a carnival, old man," the colonel said, half smiling. He wasn't unkind, but he'd seen too many kids with big dreams and no discipline. The father didn't argue, just stood there, hand on the girl's shoulder, explaining that she'd grown up shooting cans off fence posts, that she knew how to handle recoil, how to steady her breath. One SEAL, taller than the rest, muttered something under his breath about babysitting kids on a range. Another laughed quietly, turning away to adjust his scope. After a long pause, the colonel gave in with a wave of his hand. "Fine, one shot. But she stays behind the line, understood?" He pointed a thick finger at the dusty wooden barricade marking the safe firing zone. The girl stepped forward, chin lifted, calm but focused. Her father bent down, whispered something only she could hear, and she nodded once. One of the SEALs handed her a basic practice rifle. It looked almost too big for her small hands, but she took it with a quiet confidence that made the colonel squint. She stepped onto an old wooden crate to gain a little height over the barricade. She slipped the butt of the rifle into her shoulder pocket like it was second nature. Her tiny boot toes dug into the wood for balance as she squared her hips and took her stance. The SEALs, who had been joking moments ago, stood silent now, arms folded, interest replacing amusement. One of them leaned sideways to whisper, but the colonel hushed him with a look. The father stood back, arms crossed, eyes never leaving his daughter's steady hands. A gust of wind drifted across the range, fluttering the edge of the target 50 yards out. The girl adjusted her breathing, steady and deep, thumb gently brushing the safety off. Her small finger curled around the trigger with the same care someone might use to turn a page in a fragile book. Then silence. The training ground seemed to freeze, the other SEALs pausing their drills to watch. She squeezed, the rifle cracked, and the first shot snapped the paper target in the dead center ring. No one spoke. The colonel tilted his head, disbelief flickering across his rough features. The girl didn't look away from the sight. She adjusted her feet, shoulders loose but set, and squeezed again. Another shot, another clean hole nearly touching the first. A third shot, the same. The rangemaster stepped closer, squinting at the distant bullseye through his scope, his pencil dangling forgotten in his gloved hand. The father just stood behind her, a calm fortress, his eyes shining with quiet pride. The colonel stepped forward, mouth half open, as if to say something, but stopped when the girl lowered the rifle, flicked the safety back on, and lifted it off her shoulder like she'd been doing it since before she could tie her shoes. She stepped down off the crate, handed the weapon back with careful hands, and brushed a strand of hair from her eyes. The SEAL, who had laughed, first glanced away, scratching the back of his neck like maybe he'd seen something he didn't want to admit. One of the instructors crossed to the colonel, voice low but urgent. "Sir, that was tighter than last month's top score," he said, glancing at the clipboard in his hand. The colonel stared at the paper, then at the little girl, now standing beside her father, small boots planted firmly in the Nevada dirt, looking up at him with the same bright eyes that hadn't wavered once. Around them, the SEALs fell silent, the noise of rifles and drills forgotten for a moment as they took in the impossible shape of what they'd just witnessed. The colonel's boots crunched on the gravel as he stepped closer, studying the girl like she was a puzzle piece that didn't belong on his range. The SEALs gathered around, some nudging each other, all trying to look casual while sneaking glances at the target still fluttering far down range. The girl, calm as ever, stood beside her father, hands folded in front of her. The colonel cleared his throat, then nodded at the rangemaster. "Set up a real challenge," he barked, his voice carrying across the now silent ground. Two SEALs jogged down range, setting up a moving target rig that only the top marksman trained with. A series of swinging metal plates, painted bright red, designed to slide and spin with every hit. One SEAL, the tall one who'd laughed first, crossed his arms, smirking at the father. "She's good, old man. But this ain't cans on a fence," he said. The father didn't rise to the bait. He just looked at his daughter, gave her a small nod, and she stepped forward again, eyes locked on the shifting targets. One of the instructors checked the rifle, swapped the clip for a fresh mag, and handed it back to her with a look of respect that hadn't been there before. She climbed onto the crate again, her boots scraping wood, and settled the stock into her shoulder. The colonel crossed his arms, eyes narrowed, watching for any sign of nerves. There were none. The girl's breath came slow and steady as the wind gusted across the range again, tugging at the edge of her jacket. The first plate swung gently in the breeze, dancing like it was mocking her. She fired. A sharp crack. The first plate shuddered, spinning halfway around the wire with a clean hit. The SEALs stiffened, leaning in. She didn't pause. The second target swung faster. She tracked it with the muzzle, waited for the rhythm, and squeezed off a shot that rang true. Metal pinged. Another swing, another shot, 3 for 3. The instructor's pencil slipped from behind his ear, forgotten in the dirt. The colonel's jaw tightened as he watched her adjust her stance, feet shifting on the crate like she'd done this drill every morning of her life. The rangemaster barked an order, and the final plate started to move side to side, faster than the rest. A tough target, designed to make even seasoned SEALs curse under their breath. She lowered her shoulder, adjusted her cheek against the stock, breath steady, eyes narrowed. A beat passed. Another, the gun cracked. The plate jolted backward with a sharp clang, spinning wildly on its hinge. She lowered the rifle slowly this time, flicked on the safety, and stepped off the crate, boots hitting the dirt with a small cloud of dust. Silence held the range for a heartbeat before the first SEAL clapped, once, twice, then others joined in, scattered applause that grew louder until it echoed off the distant hangars. The colonel didn't clap, but his eyes softened, the edges of his mouth hinting at something like pride. He stepped forward, stopped just in front of the girl and her father, and looked down at her. She met his eyes without flinching, chin lifted, hands steady at her sides. He reached out, rested a heavy hand on her small shoulder, and gave it a firm, approving squeeze. The tall SEAL stepped forward, scratching the stubble on his chin, then stuck out a hand awkwardly. She hesitated, then took it, her small fingers swallowed by his calloused grip. He gave it a single respectful shake before stepping back to rejoin the others. The father stayed silent, a grin hidden under his weathered marine cap. The colonel turned to the range master, who still held the clipboard like it weighed 50 pounds. He flipped through the pages, then turned it around to show the colonel the scores scribbled in tight pencil marks. The colonel scanned the numbers, then looked at the target, then back at the girl. He shook his head slowly, almost laughing at his own disbelief. "You know," he said finally, his voice gruff but softer than before, "I've seen SEALs spend years trying to hit that record." The girl didn't smile, didn't boast. She just shrugged lightly, her eyes darting to her father. The father gave her a small nod, the kind only fathers and daughters understand, the kind that says, "I told you so," without saying a word. One by one, the seals drifted back to their posts, but their eyes kept sliding toward the little girl who'd stepped onto their range and turned a morning drill into something they'd tell stories about for months. The father put a gentle hand on her shoulder, guiding her back toward the chain-link fence. The colonel watched them go, boots crunching in the dirt, then barked an order that snapped the range back to life. Rifles up, magazines in, drills resumed. But something had shifted, invisible but unmistakable. As they reached the gate, the girl glanced back over her shoulder, eyes squinting against the morning sun. She didn't see the colonel watching, but he did. He watched her until the fence gate clanked shut behind them, the tall weeds brushing her boots as they stepped toward the dusty road that led home. The father didn't say anything as they walked, but the girl could feel the pride radiating off him like the warm Nevada sun on her face. The echo of the shots lingered behind them, proof that sometimes the smallest challenger leaves the biggest mark.